Welcome to the Transportation Channel podcast, where our focus is the future of transportation. I'm Matthew Perry, founder and CEO of the Transportation Channel. Our podcast will provide you with valuable insights from industry experts on a wide array of transportation-related topics. Today, our discussion centers around U.S. ports. We are joined by two Transportation Channel board members, Dick Mudge, board member for the Transportation Channel, and Alan Pisarski, advisory board member for the Transportation Channel. You can read their full bios and accomplishments in the show notes. Now let's get started. The U.S. Ports Strike Suspension with the International Longshoremen's Association Union and USMX Ownership Group reaching a deal on wage increases still leaves a contentious issue of port automation, which has to be resolved by a January 15th deadline of 2025. So with that, gentlemen, we're going to start. Just to give people a basic background, how important are deep draft ports to the U.S. economy? Dick, I'll start with you.
They're vital. Like a lot of things in transportation, no one knows how stuff got to our door. So you don't pick up a good and say how much did this come from a deep draft port or not. It just shows magically. But ports in general, there are about 1 million employees at U.S. ports. There are probably 21 million employees who work at companies that depend on international trade. It's quite large.
I
Alan,
guess I would
to you.
add, I guess I would add, Matt, that fundamentally we are now a consumer nation. We are looking throughout the world for things to bring here. We also do export substantial things, but largely I think what our daily lives center around is what's coming through those ports. And so it is a very, very crucial component of our economy and our lifestyle.
Yeah, and I think the U.S. economy, U.S. ports add about 10% to the overall U.S. GDP, which is huge in terms of its contribution. Dick, did you want to add something else to that?
I was going to say, I'd follow up on Alan's comment. The U.S. exports a lot of things, and most of it's bulk material. It's grain, it's oil. That's not something that goes through the major ports.
Interesting. Automation obviously was a big part of the strike and the pending strike on January 15th coming up. In terms of automation, how do U.S. ports compare with other ports in the world? Dick?
According to the World Bank, we don't do very well. They say there are 0 U.S. ports. They rank in the top 50 in the world. It's not something that that we're a world leader. Some places, you look at places in Europe, Rotterdam's been automated since 1980.
Alan, did you want to add something to that?
Yes, a couple of thoughts. I think we are certainly less productive, but Dick mentioned the World Bank report. The GAO looked at this, and I found it really quite impressive. I learned a great deal. It basically indicated that we don't have the volumes that some of those other ports have that justifies the kinds of automation that has come to be significant. And even more important, the thing we just kind of discussed in the first question, we are a nation where those ports are transshipping from ship to truck to train, going out 3 million square miles of America, 60 million people. Many of those other ports that are highly automated are going ship to ship. They're bringing in ships and taking containers off of ship A and putting it on ship B. that's a very different world. If you think of Port of Los Angeles, Long Beach, I think it's 5,000 trucks a day. I mean, it's staggering.
Yeah, that is staggering. So that brings up an interesting point because especially during the strike and some of the industry professionals that I've spoken with, um, and why port automation in the U.S. seems to be such a contentious issue. I thought it was, and some of the people that I spoke with thought it was just the workers not wanting automation. But you bring up a good point that, our ports have different needs than, a port in other parts of the world, which may not need as much automation, right? Is that,
You've just said where I was until I looked at the GAO report and began to think about it. It was a classic Luddite issue of guys preserving jobs versus automation. But there are components to this that I think have great relevance that need to be recognized and considered.
yeah, for sure. Dick, do you have anything to add on, like, why do you think, and to both of you, why is port automation in the US such a major issue to the point where it caused an initial strike, and to the point where, the strike is looming January 15th? Why do you think it's such a major issue?
I think this is also true with for this other automation. There's a lot of talk about automating trucks. Uh, Everybody in the unions, but also beyond that, look at the first move and they say, if we're going to automate something, one individual or one type of job will no longer be needed. What they don't look at is how does that increase the flow of goods, the flow of activity. There's tremendous leverage there. In the U.S., has some of the biggest ports in the world, but we don't rank in the top 50 in terms of being efficient.
Alan?
Well, I guess I would just kind of support what Dick said. And I think the sense is that we'll be producing better jobs in that automation field, both in the production and in actually on the in the port facility itself. Safer jobs, less risky, less dangerous, less difficult hours. I think many factors that would play into it, and I would hope that people would be able to see it. Another great simple answer in many of these cases is, where is the land available to create and to manage this kind of a facility?
A lot of the stuff too. If you have a more efficient port, move goods more efficiently, that will stimulate the flow of goods, which means there has to be more people to handle that greater industrial growth. So a lot of the jobs you'll never see at the port.
I see. So are you saying that jobs could be like transferred elsewhere? Like jobs will be lost at the port, but they'll be made up
Not
elsewhere in the
necessarily.
economy? Okay.
I guess some jobs could be lost at the port. The grand total number of jobs will definitely go up.
I see.
And that's where you get into issues. If you're a longshoremen's union, you may say, it's great that there are more jobs in the country, but we want jobs in our union.
Yeah, it doesn't help the actual union at the port itself. Yeah, that's interesting. And to that end, to what extent will other ports around the country, I think this is an East Coast issue, right? If other ports around the country, to what extent can they make up the slack or accommodate an extra load in case of an East Coast strike? Do we have any data on that, or do you have any feeling on that?
I don't see how they could do it.
Yeah.
If you do, you'd probably be shipping more goods through the Panama Canal, or shipping more goods on railroads or trucks across the country.
Yeah.
They can probably take up some of the load. But if you're it's hard to shift stuff when you're moving into. You're shipping some goods from Germany. It's not going to go to the West Coast.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you think about what we learned in the harbor, the Baltimore Harbor bridge disaster, that even making adjustments from Baltimore to Virginia, Baltimore to Charleston, involves immense complexity and shifting of plans and all the logistics around the whole thing. By the way, let me use that word of logistics again. One of the things in the GAO report that's immensely emphasized is that how important artificial intelligence kinds of things are in these ports. One of the things that I was always concerned about, I've spent my life in transportation, tended to kind of avoid talking about ports because of the complexities of how many different players there are in the game and how many different interests there are. But I think this artificial intelligence point makes it clear that there are powerful ways in which we can all benefit from those kind of challenges.
Yeah, I mean, AI is going to play a major role in just about every industry, and I can't imagine that, the ports would be left out in that in this AI transformation.
I think the big thing, the big thing to me always with the ports was security.
Mhm.
I mean, you have hundreds of thousands of containers into America, every one of which could have a hydrogen bomb in, any
That's a
one
great
of
point.
which.
Yeah,
And somebody's got to have a secure situation in Asia, in Europe, in other ports. And that flow protection is an extraordinary challenge.
yeah, and the flow protection that you mentioned, that's got to start at the point of origin,
Yes.
correct?
Oh,
And that's
yes.
got to
That's
start over there,
I
and
guess
then
Dick maybe knows better than I do, but as I recall, when I was in the department, the Coast Guard um, had people in almost all of the export ports in the world, making sure that what was going on those ships was legit.
I know the
yeah,
Department of Homeland Security is very
Yeah.
active in this, and there are
Uh,
all sorts of sensors they have out there to sense what's on the container. Is it dangerous or not?
yeah.
But you're right. It's scary to think of what could be in one of these containers because they're
yeah.
big.
Yeah, security is certainly an issue. But just to backtrack real quick, I mean, Dick, you brought up a good point, and Alan as well. It's not as easy to, when there's a disruption, whether it's on the East Coast or wherever in the U.S., to just shift to another port. It's not that easy, right? So it's just when there's a disruption, it really could have a ripple effect on the U.S. economy because,
Oh,
as you
well,
guys
that's
both mentioned, it's not that easy.
I think the ripple effect will start soon too. If people really believe there will be a strike in January, they're already changing how they ship goods.
That's right. That's right. So they're sort of like front loading those goods, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
Getting them in
The
here.
papers today were talking about accelerating imports in anticipation of not having access in January.
That's
So you
interesting because it could have a. I'm sorry, Alan. Go ahead.
no, go ahead. Please.
I was just going to say that it could have an interesting impact on inflation if we get a surge of goods initially. That could dampen inflation, which is a good thing ultimately for the consumer. But then if a strike is not averted and January 15th comes along and there's a strike, well, that's going to disrupt the supply chain moving forward and inflation will go higher because of it. So just a very interesting dynamic of the impending strike and then potential strike. Yeah.
That your comment just shows how transportation has tremendous impacts across the economy, and a lot of things people just take for granted.
Very well said, Dick. Very well said. And with that, I think we're going to end this session on ports in the U.S. And I wanted to thank Dick Mudge, our board member, and I wanted to thank Alan Pisarski, our advisory board member, for their valuable insights. Please remember to go to thetransportationchannel.com and upload a video and become part of our growing community. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.